you haven't seen the first video, you should probably go watch that one before watching this one. Okay, let's get started. But the next book is called One False Note by Gordon Corman. And it starts off, actually, with them on a train heading to Vienna. There's Vienna. Wrap that around. Okay. So, they're on a train heading to Vienna, but before we get into the general plot, something that I forgot to bring up with the first book, and something that goes along with every single other book, is that they like to hide puzzles inside the book. Whether it corresponded with something on the website or just a general feel of the entire book in order to get clues to what's about to happen. For example, this one is a simple note puzzle where each note, for example, we have a G, a D, and an E to spell out Gideon. And something that they usually do is they hide little, I'm gonna try to hold it up. They'll hide puzzles in where the page number is supposed to be. So you can go through and start solving them. For example, this one says, look to India. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly what that means. I don't think they even travel to India through any of the books. So I'm not sure if it's a puzzle that corresponds to one of the website games. And the website is something that is probably going to be the last thing that I hit on after talking about the entire 10-book series. So the story starts out on a train to Austria, more specifically Vienna, where Dan and Amy are riding with Nellie and trying to figure out where they're going to go next or what the next clue has to do with anything. When all of a sudden the Holts barge onto the train, they go up to Dan and Amy, start strangling Dan, demanding the clue. Amy relinquishes the clue over to him. Dan is able to literally write the entire piece of music by memory, which shows just the most impressive photographic memory, where these kids are just superhuman in terms of some logical reasoning and some just like, how? And then the Holts literally yeet themselves out of the train, like literally while the train is still in motion, jump out of the train, and then just disappear for the rest of the book. Hi, yes, I just wanted to come back because I went over it very quickly when I was first recording this. I did not mince words. Eisenhower literally tries to strangle Dan in order to give them the clue. Like, literally. And I blow through it so fast because, honestly, at that point, after reading through the entire series, I'm so used to attempted child murder in these books that I'm like, okay, whatever, it's just another one on the list. But this is really the first time where it's, like, out in public, too, on a crowded train where they just casually do this. But yes, this happens, and then they immediately jump off of the train while it's moving. That happens. I don't know why. I don't know why it's here. I just wanted to clarify because it is insane. Oh, I forgot. The Holts actually don't get the clue. Saladin literally eats the sheet music. Good cat. So they go to a museum dedicated towards Mozart and find out that there's a library inside the museum, start researching things relating to Ben Franklin, seeing if they can find anything, and then find out that Mozart actually had a sister who wasn't as focused on as Mozart himself, mainly because she was a girl, and find out that the diary that she had kept is in the museum. So when they go up to the librarian to request for the diary, turns out the diary has been stolen, because of course it has. So it turns out that Jonah has stolen the diary and is in a hotel. But I'd like to point out the specific line to just date this book, where he's being flooded by paparazzi, and one of the paparazzi asked him, "Any truth to the rumor that you're dating Miley Cyrus?" Please note that Jonah is 15. This is when she was still like Hannah Montana, I think. If like this book was published December 2008. So, and written before then, so I think this is still in peak Hannah Montana fame. and not Wrecking Ball, thank God. So they track Jonah over to a hotel, which is like the most expensive hotel in Vienna, and they expect him to be there because he's Jonah, of course he is. Nellie comes up with the plan that she will dress up as a maid, stuff Dan and Amy into a laundry basket, or like a laundry cart, and then go up to Jonah's room in order to see if they can find a journal or anything relating to Mozart in order to figure out where to go next. They go up to what they think is his room, get into the room using a keycard that they stole, and find out that it's in fact not Jonah's room, but the Grand Duke of Luxembourg's room. So Nellie gets screwed over and has to clean the Grand Duke of Luxembourg's room, while Dan and Amy sneak downstairs to where Jonah's actual room is to search for clues. Dan and Amy are able to successfully break into Jonah's hotel room, start looking around, and notice something is tucked in the chandelier. They find Nonriel's diary, are able to get out of the chandelier, but then end up knocking the entire chandelier down. So the chandelier crashes down. Nellie is being caught on the floor above because she's wearing a nose ring, which honestly gets her noticed more times than it's actually worth. Start being escorted away, pretends to be a Jonah Wizard fan, like trying to get into the room in order to feign innocence or slight innocence. Dan and Amy book it. Make it to a window above an awning. Dan jumps onto the awning that is 6 feet down. It doesn't rip, he climbs off of it. Amy does the same thing, and they run away, escaping with the diary. So after getting the diary, tricking Irina into taking something that isn't the diary, and discovering that 3 pages of it has been taken out by Jonah, they decide to stop working on the diary for a little bit and go back to the music, where they had already discovered that the sheet music had 3 lines added than to what the original sheet music should have been. So they go downstairs and start playing the music on the piano, and they get bystander ex machina, where someone recognizes the music, just this random lady, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. This is like an old Austrian folk song called The Place Where I Was Born. Thank you for playing it. And they discovered they need to go to Salzburg, which is where Mozart was born. Where's Salzburg on a map? Oh wow, it's like across. It's just literally on the other side of Vienna. I mean, other side of Austria. Okay, well then. So they decide to rent this really old Fiat and head over to Salzburg to see if they can find anything. It's there. So once they get to Salzburg, they go to, wait, where do they go? So once they reach Salzburg, they were planning on heading to Mozart's actual house, but notice Alistair at St. Peter's Arch Abbey. Notice him going into the Salzburg catacombs. Yes, the second book with catacombs. They also notice the Man in Black in the meantime, and they head into the catacombs, where an explosion gets set off, because of course it does. We're just going to mark another almost dying after the ceiling collapsing. So they are now trapped in the catacombs, but then are able to find at least a little way out, and they end up finding a room that they wouldn't have found otherwise if the ceiling had actually not collapsed in, and find what seems to be a formula. So they're like, hey, could we have won this in the second book? But because we have 8 more in front of us, of course we haven't. So they start getting chased by monks. They start being chased by the Benedictine monks of St. Peter's specifically, as they chase after them in order to keep the formula that they stole. Turns out that they didn't find a formula or anything actually useful to the 39 clues, but it turns out that they stole Benedictine, which is an ancient recipe that has been in the monastery for centuries, so of course they were being chased. The fools. So hi, I'm back again, just a little while later. I didn't really say it properly when I was recording this the first time, but they did steal an elixir of sorts, because the 39 Clues is supposed to make a potion to make you the most powerful person on Earth. Just that this potion just makes you feel like that, because Benedictine is actually a 40% alcohol
liquor
that, you know, was still developed by the Benedictine monks in France, but don't worry about that, it's similar enough. Just look that up. That's apparently what they have now. This 11 and 13-year-old about to get lit. Oh, fuck. Oh, God. Oh, no. Oh, God. Oh, no. So, after escaping from St. Peter's, they continue to follow Alistair, and they find him sleeping, and discover that he had actually found something and had hidden it in his cane. So while he's sleeping, these children steal a document from him, and notice that it's, after they go back to their hotel, they notice that it's a concert poster that's written in Italian advertising Mozart in Venice. So their next location that they head to in that same crappy rental car that they rented is Venice. So while they head to Venice, and just as they arrive there, they notice that Jonah has actually come to Venice as well. So they follow Jonah to a record store where he seems to have disappeared, just out of nowhere. Like, he's disappeared off the face of the planet. Like, he entered and he's not there. So Nellie, and her probably the most useful she has been and will be for most of the books, comes up with another plan. Where she goes into the record store by herself, starts flipping through some of the records, takes a whole bunch of them, and probably my favorite line in the book of, "You're a music lover," said the wide-eyed cashier. "No, I'm a kleptomaniac," and she dashed out the door. So Nellie just steals a whole bunch of stuff from the store and gets on out of there. This is probably peak Nellie. Nellie is definitely a side character throughout most of the books, and sometimes she's even just left. Like in the 5th book, Nellie is just gone because they literally left her behind. It is ridiculous how far Nellie gets shoved in the corner sometimes, to where even in the last book, it's sometimes she's referenced being there, but it's almost like she's not there in the same room as them sometimes. So I actually like this book more than the first one, just because I feel like it does a better job of not only getting that same mystery aspect, not only doing a great job with the integrating the history aspect as well, but also getting rid of either stupid details or just doing a good job blending fact and fiction. The reason why I think this book does a better job than the first book at blending fact and fiction is because they bring up this guy named Fidelio Racco, who seems to be a go-between in terms of promoting the concerts in Italy and getting stuff to Ben Franklin, because Mozart and Ben Franklin have apparently been talking. But the thing that really threw me for a loop is that he doesn't exist. I could have sworn that maybe they took a less known historic figure, or maybe had helped Mozart, but just is never talked about, and turned him into more of a key aspect. But no, he's just completely made up. And it's so believable that you could honestly think that Racco is an actual person. I honestly thought he was until I looked it up, which is why I think it is one of the better cases of historical fiction. And once we get to the 5th book as well, that's another good example of how the books blend fact and fiction. So after they sneak into the record store, well, not really sneak because Nellie already got the guy out of there, they discover that it's actually a front for a Janus secret stronghold. Yes, we already had the Lucian one, which they easily broke into. Time for another one that they've broken into. Once they enter, however, they realize it's more of a museum dedicated to Janus members who are more world-renowned and famous than an actual strategic stronghold. For example, there's a branch of the museum dedicated to Houdini, and there's another branch that's dedicated to Mozart. So they sneak their way in and realize that Jonah is actually there to see the pages taken out of the book. However, they end up actually getting caught again, technically, since they started getting chased in the Lucian stronghold, but are able to escape. They are noticed and attempted to be caught, but there is a live art show going on at the time, and Amy takes a bucket of paint, rushes over to the famous George Washington portrait that apparently a fake is hanging in the White House and the actual one is in this stronghold in Venice, and goes, "If you don't give us the pages, I will ruin this portrait." The greatest part is it works. They're able to, once they get the pages, they narrowly escape from the stronghold, but are able to get out into the canals of Venice. However, once they escape into the canals, they're still being chased, so Dan, being very quick thinking, notices someone who had parked their boat temporarily with the keys still in the ignition jump in. Amy yells at him, "That's stealing!" Dan yells back, "It's borrowing, and it's an emergency." So he jumps in and tries to start driving the boat. And again, with one of my other favorite lines in this book, Amy goes, "Dan, this is crazy," Amy quavered. "You can't drive a boat." Dan, "Says who? It's no different from Xbox." So Dan drives the boat around with reckless abandon, and trying to find a hiding space for the pages in case they actually do get caught. And they find a boat called the Royal Saladin, thankfully enough, because of course the cat, and stash the pages onto it. Once they think they've gotten away, they notice another boat following them, but it's too big to get under a bridge. And they describe Dan made a rude gesture towards the yacht, so we all know that Dan did the expert plan of flicking off the yacht, and then accidentally ram right into another boat and get thrown into the water. They wake up from the boat crash and realize that they are in the hold of another ship, presumably the big yacht that they crashed into. They think that he might have been kidnapped by Magicals, but Natalie and Ian show up and try to get anything that they can. Because they already stowed away the pages, Dan and Amy have nothing to give them, so they're thrown out off the boat into the canal. They meet back up with Nellie and then try to find the Royal Saladin where they last saw it, and it is nowhere to be seen, which is fantastic. After being depressed for a little bit, they actually end up finding the Royal Saladin as it's coming down the canal with a wedding group on it, and one of the best men takes the seat cushion that they had hid the notes in and almost takes it into the wedding because he is that drunk apparently, but he leaves it on the ship, so they're able to go grab the notes and end up reading it and discovering that Marie Antoinette was apparently the go-between between Mozart and Ben Franklin, and in the corner, Grace had apparently had a hold on some of these pages because she had written in the margin a reference to Marie's famous quote of "let them eat cake." And they also find another set of markings above, again, Fidelio Racco's name, saying D is greater than HIC. And it turns out that Fidelio had been importing stuff for Mozart and then overcharging him, and he also turned out to be a Cahill. And in the next chapter, it's explained who exactly he was and how he's a wealthy merchant in Venice. And it's so convincing with every other famous name being said. I honestly thought that this was an actual person, and this book does a great job of blurring the line between fact and fiction. Wait, is he an actual person? Because they make it out. I'm honestly doubting myself at this point. No, it is, no. Oh my god, again, this book, I had to research it. It's still a 39 Clues exclusive person. It's not real, but they do such a good job of making it seem like he's real. Well, anyway, in Racco's house, which has been converted into a museum, is Mozart's harpsichord. They hide in the bathroom and wait until closing, and right before they're about to check out the harpsichord, Natalie comes up behind with the dart gun, and Ian and Natalie both threaten them that if they don't move out of the way, they're gonna get darted. It turns out that the coppers had been tracking Dan and Amy from the beginning and already knew which piece of music to play at the harpsichord, so Ian goes up and starts playing, but Amy notices a little string on D above high C, which is the clue they noticed earlier, and realized that the harpsichord is booby-trapped. Right as she realizes it, Ian plays the note, and it just straight up explodes. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it just straight up explodes. After the thing blows up, Ian is knocked out. Dan is able to wrestle the dart gun away from Natalie and shoot her with the dart gun, so she's out as well. And a part of the floor opens up, revealing samurai swords. So I'm glad that this book waits until the very end to go off the rails, which I'm fine with. I like the build-up. With that book, with the first book, everything went crazy all at once. Like, at the very beginning, you already had a house burning down, you already had almost getting run over by a train, you almost had being buried in cement, you almost had being a literal domestic terrorist attack against a museum. But with this, it's until the very end that stuff kind of goes crazy. You had minor things up until now. They also figure out that the clue is tungsten, because Racco was importing wolfram, which is another name for tungsten, into Italy for Mozart. And the French translation of the word cake is gâteau. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that completely. I took Latin. I have no idea. The clue that Grace left behind was take the music out of the cake. And after taking out everything, you still had TU, which is the beginning of tungsten, which Dan says was the old chemical symbol for tungsten. W is the one now. I'm not sure if TU was the one beforehand. With that, with the samurai swords, and the fact that they had been importing wolfram in from Japan, they have their next lead into the next book. And William McIntyre again meets up with the Man in Black at the end of this book. So that was the second book. I don't have much to say, although this one is actually above the first one, just because I feel like this was a more complete story. It didn't have as many threads. It didn't have as many off-the-rail moments. I do love off-the-rail moments, but it needs to be, like, it needs to make sense, if that makes sense. And I feel like it does a better job of blending fact and fiction. But there isn't much to say about that otherwise. It doesn't really deal with any hard themes. It is just kind of a mindless adventure book. Even I'm not even going to say just because it's a kid's adventure book, because there is a bunch of these later on that I want to go into more detail about the themes and the ideas that it brings up. But this one, other than the Racco making up an historical figure and doing a good job of that, of me, even while I'm recording this video, doubting myself that it's an actual person, there's not much else to say. It's a good book, and again, I still think it's better than the first one, but there's not much else to say about it. I'm gonna stop recording.